So, this is a Dig Deep Institute class. It's about leadership, and it's called Leadership to the Glory of God. Let's talk about the class and what we're going to do. Advanced slide. All right, so the course overview, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to intro the class and we're going to clarify our missions. A lot of times we talk about what leadership is, and we talk about humility, and we talk about all these things that are ultimately things that are um, like things that we're not supposed to do. Like don't do this, don't do that. And then there are all kinds of things like, oh, be reasonable. Um, all these things that kind of feels like it pressures us not to look to a standard, but to kind of be soft. And I don't think that's what God calls us to do. So I'm going to make my case for that. We're going to talk about the logos, the ethos, and the pathos of leadership. We're going to talk about what it means to have a good case with the logos, to be the man who is followable and someone you could listen to. We're going to talk about the pathos, which is creating that emotional connection. And if we're talking about these are from rhetoric, right? These are the things you do if you want to make a good argument, kind of win a debate, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to take these as a pattern for how to lead in a way that is true, the logos, in a way that builds your character, ethos, and then in a way that actually loves your family and loves the people around you and generating that pathos from the inside, not manufacturing it, but being the person who loves people uh, and then someone who is ultimately followable and trustworthy. As we go on in the class toward the end, the last few weeks, we're going to talk about attacks on leadership at home, attacks on leadership at work, and then attacks in other domains as well. And so let's go. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about the objectives of the class. We're going to look at the class outline, which we sort of did. And then we're going to do a course intro, which is how leaders think, session one, how leaders think. All right, so let's start out with some class objectives. All right, the goal of the class, and I think I need to edit this slide, but the goal of the class is to develop principles of leadership to influence and transform our domains. What are our domains? Family, work, church, and the local community. And we're influencing all these things, we're transforming them to the glory of God. We have a lot of different potential eschatologies, end times scenarios, and all this stuff. Some of them are like, hey, we're not supposed to get involved in politics, or we're not. I've heard people say that, and my case would be that we honor God, we do everything to the glory of God, and we let what happens happens. We let God work through us. We trust Him with the results. Our job is to be these men who know how to do this, who will influence our family and influence everybody we can to the glory of God, so that all the men in this class can think and act like a biblical leader. All right, so here's what you should expect to come out of this class. Again, I need to edit this slide. So, first thing is clarity as to the goal of leadership. That's something that in the last class we weren't super clear on that, and it was a good conversation, but I realized that this time we need to get more clarity. We'll get an understanding of what it means to order everything in our domains to His glory. What does that mean? Well, it means to do like what the kings did, the good kings in the Bible. They tore down the high places, right? They outlawed the sacrifices to other gods because they were a godly people, right? God had reserved them, the Israelites. And so these good kings created boundaries. They outlawed things. They killed temple prostitutes. Killed some of these temple prostitutes at some points. They killed they killed the priests of Baal at one point. Was it Elijah? Killed the priests had him killed. And so having these standards and knowing how to execute those standards in our household. What does it mean to order everything in our domains to his glory? What does it mean to make every decision ultimately to his glory? Three, a conviction to reject vagueness and moderation when it comes to the pursuit of his glory. So now we live in a time where it's like, oh, we don't want to go crazy. We don't want to be extreme. Um, we don't want to, make everybody think we're crazy or we're zealots. And yet the Bible, I don't know if you can make a case in the Bible that moderation when it comes to the pursuit of his glory is something that's good, right? So when we say moderation in all things, I think what we really mean is moderation in most things and extremism in the pursuit of his glory. Because now we're talking about grace and truth. We're talking about love and truth. And these things are not at odds with each other. You can't be, oh, you have too much truth and not enough love. Well, you may have not enough love, but you don't have too much truth. Oh, you have too much love and not enough truth. Well, no, you don't have too much love. You may not have enough truth. But these things are good to the extreme, and his glory is seeking after his glory is good to the extreme. It orients us. It helps us understand every single commandment, and it helps us understand his life, death, resurrection, and it helps us understand our place before him. And so this is we need to reject vagueness and moderation when it comes to the pursuit of his glory. And then we're going to come out with an understanding of how the glory of God is expressed in the small things, all the way down to the daily policies and decisions you make in your household. All right. Again, I need to edit some of these slides. First half of the class, leadership lessons from classical rhetoric. So we're gonna use these, like I said, as a pattern for leadership. So, and I won't go into that now because we will later. Second half, we're going to talk about contemporary attacks on leadership. Like what are today's attacks that come to our leadership at home, at work, and in other domains? Because the leadership we get from the Bible, the lessons we get from the Word of God, those are things that are going to help us in every area of our life. And if you obeyed everything and developed yourself, disciplined yourself using the Word of God as the example, you would not be able to help being a leader. People would follow you because of who you've become. And so let's continue. Class summary. Okay. So this is the summary of the whole class. If I were to intro this, in fact, I will tomorrow morning in church, it would be that leaders bring clarity. They keep the first things first and keep everyone oriented, hopeful, productive, and ready. And so when we look at this, we see any leader, think about at work, think about in the Bible, men pointing people to the glory of God, putting that as the first thing, keeping the first things first. There's a huge advantage to this when you are leading other people. When you are pointing to things higher than yourself, now it's not your selfish authority, your own judgment, your own glory you're trying to follow, that you're asking your wife, your coworkers, or even your boss to follow. When you're bringing clarity, when you're pointing to the glory of God or the highest thing, let's say you're at work and you're at a secular environment. Sure, they may not buy into the glory of God, but take one step out from there because you are buying into the glory of God. You are fully convinced. Now what you're doing is you're saying, okay, the glory of God is primary. In my workplace, the primary thing I need to do is to serve my workplace to the glory of God. And so you take the mission, the values of your company, and then now you're reminding everybody, okay, I may not be able to make this about the glory of God, but I can certainly make it about how serving the company is oriented toward the glory of God. And now you don't tolerate people not doing that, right? You don't tolerate people not serving the company. You orient them toward that, toward the values and toward the way the company does things. And then for your boss, you're saying, hey, we're not doing what we said we'd do, and that makes us hypocrites, right? And you may or may not tell them this is to the glory of God, but basically you're giving yourself a very firm foundation for leadership and a very firm foundation for your case for leadership. Likewise, in the home, you want your wife to do something, maybe have some people over, let's say, and she doesn't want to, and you're just like, honey, the reason I want to do this is not because I want to have them over because it's what I want. I want it because it furthers fellowship. It gives them it's hospitable. It creates connections between us and other people in the church. And by doing that, it glorifies God. It opens up conversations we can have. We will pray together over our meal. We will talk about life. We will sharpen iron to the glory of God. And now all of a sudden it's not about you. It's about the glory of God. Now your wife is buying into this bigger thing, bigger than you. It is for the glory of God. And that's way more compelling. The focus on the goal, aligning leadership to the glory of God. So the focus on the goal. So I may have to fix that, but focus on the goal, right? Aligning leadership to the glory of God. How do we know we're leading? Well, we are doing everything to the glory of God first and foremost. There may be some social skills with that. There may be some character things we'll figure out, but the focus is aligning you with the glory of God is the first thing in this, the first order of business. Who's this for? Biblical men and boys. Basically anybody who wants to lead from a biblical foundation, a very strong and firm biblical foundation that will benefit you everywhere. You will have a huge advantage over other men who are not biblical in their leadership. This is for husbands, fathers, managers, entrepreneurs, or any other role where people can be influenced to honor God, whether it is in your present or your future, whether you're a young man or an old man, and where people can be influenced to honor God, whether they do that indirectly or directly, whether you can tell them, hey, we're doing this for the glory of God, or indirectly, hey, we're doing this for the company because it's right to serve the company. It is right to earn the money that you earn your paycheck, right? And it's right to honor that commitment you've made to your employer. All right. What leadership should look like. So this is the big step, right? Figuring out what leadership should look like. We're so used to hearing everybody, look at that title case. We're so used to hearing people talk about how, don't do this, don't do that. As a leader, defer to other people, be humble, which means that you listen to everybody's opinions and hold them high. And but what real leadership looks like is it's not what the world thinks. So let's talk about it. So the first thing is, let's start here. Before we get into all that, let's start here. We need to adjust our expectations. So we have this idea, and I think I call it unicorns and rainbows, right? Like, oh, my family is perfect. My wife never sins, and the kids are and the kids are always obedient. My wife's never wrong or rebellious, and the kids are the same way, and they're growing and nurtured and always cooperating with my plan as the leader. And by the way, I'm perfect and don't need to grow at all, giving good wisdom at all times, completely trusted and able to make everything I ask them to do sound good, right? Like I'm a great leader and perfect person, sinless basically. Okay, so maybe that's a little bit crazy, but in reality, your wife is not that way, right? Your kids are not that way, and you are not that way. And so, in order to set ourselves up for success, we have to be able to say, like, own our reality. We have to be honest. We have to acknowledge our family's sin, their rebellion, and all of our imperfections. And we can't be mad at them for it. We can't know that they're sinners and then just be like, oh, but I expect perfection. You're expecting something isn't going to happen. And that's just, you're misaligned with reality. And so instead, you want to own reality. You want to acknowledge those things. And you don't want to feel like you have to be mad at people for being sinners, because you know they're going to be sinners. Why are you surprised? Why are you mad? There's probably a time to do that, but it's not with your family on a day to day, minute by minute basis. It's not at work with your the people around you. It's not in public, right? You don't want to just be getting mad at people. You want to realize that on the road, that person who just cut me off, um, I kind of should expect that. And then when we do that, we can adjust. We can make adjustments in our own behavior. We can make adjustments for each other, for reality, and we can build on a foundation of right expectations. And so we're aligned with reality, and we're not constantly knocked off kilter by things by sinners who are gonna sin, right? They're gonna sin. So why should we be surprised? All right. And then we give focus to God's glory. And so instead of um, you know instead of for the first thing we do is we don't get mad at people, but we point them to God's glory. We adjust our expectations about what's going on around us, and now that we're clear on what's going to happen, we give focus to God's glory. We put the emphasis on His glory for all decisions. This gives us clarity. This gives us the ultimate why for all the decisions we make. And then we take responsibility to lead well, even though our families aren't perfect, right? Even though we're not perfect. We take responsibility to lead well, to convince, to exhort, to get on their page and find a way to get them to take on more godliness in the same way that those who disciple us do the same thing. Same thing at work. Adjust your expectations. It's not unicorns and rainbows. Get a hold of that reality. And when you're dealing with people, find a way to meet them where they're at and pull them forward. Pull them forward. All right, and that's the next thing too, because right now everybody's like, you're supposed to be gentle and you're not supposed to tell anybody, criticize anybody for anything, and that is not true. Paul criticizes the Corinthians. Think about the Bible is a criticism of us, in a lot of ways. There's conflict. Nehemiah, Tobiah and Sanballat, I think they tried to get him knocked off his game, and they're just like, well, come visit us and waste time. And Nehemiah's like, I'm not wasting time with you guys. I'm not going there because I have a mission. I know what I'm about, and I'm not just gonna stop moving forward in God's plan because you guys want me to come and visit you and talk about some things. Like, it's already settled, dudes. I'm moving forward, and so you guys can figure out your own stuff. He wasn't just winsome, and he wasn't just doing whatever they wanted him to, because guess what? Humility is not doing what everybody wants you to do. Let's go to the next slide. Humility is humility before God, and it's bold before men. And so, personally, I'm not asking anyone's permission to serve God with my whole heart. I'm not asking that, because I'm humble before God, but I'm bold before men. I don't care if they like it or if it hurts their feelings, because I am humble before God and bold before men. And I don't even care if they claim I'm unloving or not winsome. Truth comes first. That is because I am humble before God and I let Him decide what's important, and I'm bold before men. So when we talk about humility, we talk about, a lot of times humility is defined as be a politician, be a servant leader, take care of people and don't worry about the goal. And biblically, though, we don't do that. Biblically, we follow hard after God, follow hard after Him, and then we invite people to follow us, and we hope they follow us. But if they don't, we don't stop our walk. We don't go to their parties. We don't try to be like them. We don't try to dress like them. We don't do all this stuff to try to convince them we're cool. We are humble before God, bold before men. We go forward to holiness, and we invite them with us to go with us. We disciple, we convince, we exhort, we encourage. All right. Questions for leaders. So we just talked about how leadership isn't just keeping everybody happy, right? In our homes, at work, we set boundaries. What king did not set boundaries in the Old Testament? And you may think, well, what does kings have to do with it? We're not kings, but what other example do we have to look at? We have Jesus for sure. Jesus was a king though, and he was humble before God, and he was bold before men. He loved people. Kings should love their people. Um, we're not grand kings who don't know our people. Our people are in our own house. There are direct reports at work. Um, there are people out in public that we want to convince. But and it's much more personal than a king, in ancient Israel. But don't be fooled. It's the same job. It's just on a much smaller scale. So unless you can convince me that leadership at the king level has different fundamental responsibilities, I still have to defend my home. I still have to, help make laws, convert that to family policies that help everybody know what's expected of them, the kind of behavior that's expected. I still have to create order in my home and boundaries and defend it and create an environment where holiness can grow. Children, wives, myself can grow in holiness without distraction, without letting sin encroach upon our home. And so, what must we insist upon? And I'm not answering this question right now. I'm just saying we need to think about this. This isn't just like, oh, just try to get along with everybody, just be reasonable. No, we have to say, what must we insist upon? And that probably means going to the Word of God and saying, well, what must we insist upon? I think we answer the question at the bottom. What must we refuse to tolerate in our home? I had a pastor tell me that his daughter was going to do, his wife wanted his daughter to do dance or some kind of like cheerleading or something, probably at a public school, probably something, somewhat provocative maybe, or dressed in a way that he wasn't comfortable with, but definitely something sexual related that he wasn't comfortable with. And his wife convinced him to be reasonable. His wife convinced him that he was worried about nothing. And we can't think like that. We can't let people convince us. We have to say, no, this is intolerable. We're not looking for a reasonable. We're not looking for the average opinion, right? Like average out all the opinions of the people around us, and that's what we do because we're reasonable. No, does it glorify God or does it not glorify God? And so, what must we insist upon in our home, and in our work, in our own behavior, and the behavior of those around us? What must we refuse to tolerate? There's a line, y'all, and we need to be able to draw that line. If you can't draw the line, you're not being a leader. All right. And the last question though is, and how do we know? And this is really where we're going to get into this, like how can you know this epistemology, the study of how to know things, right? And it's not going to be complicated. You're going to find that it's very simple because the standard is this: godly leaders challenge others to live to the glory of God. Now, like I said, at work, you may not have this situation where you can say, hey, guess what? This is a Christian company. We honor the glory of God, because you may not be the owner of the company. But you can certainly, and even if you are, you may find it inappropriate and maybe not the best way to do things, to tell everybody they have to be Christians, or however you roll that out. But the main idea is that we can, even if it's just, hey, we need to honor our employer, we need to do the right thing, and you don't have to tell them you're getting it from the Bible, but you will challenge them to live in a way, to act in a way that is consistent with biblical principles laid down by God. And so the book of Proverbs would be a great example, right? Um, and so godly leaders, and in the home it's a little easier because you can say, hey, this is a godly household, and we are doing everything to the glory of God. So it's either direct or indirect, right? Explicitly biblical, or implicitly biblical, where you imply, it's at work, a secular environment. You can't tell everybody they have to do things to the glory of God because they're not Christians and they're not going to. But you can tell them the standard. You can give them the standard, and they don't have to know that it's from the Scripture. But you may get a chance to make that connection for them. All right. Oh, and then the question is, oh, are we theonomists now, and are we saying that we're living in a, what's that book, Christian nationalism? I don't know about all that, but I do know that society will function better if we have biblical standards of how to live, how to treat each other, jurisprudence, and all that stuff. We will have a better society. I'd be surprised if any Christian would tell me the opposite. So I don't know about Christian nationalism. I don't know how everyone's defining all that, but biblical principles will win the day. They will win. All right. So, what's the goal? To clarify our mission to the glory of God. That's the goal. Clarify that mission, tie it into the glory of God. First thing is realizing we have enemies. All right. So, the first thing we need to realize is, and there are enemies coming after those we love and are responsible for, and then they're coming after us too. And then the second thing is sometimes our enemies or sometimes our enemy even uses those we love and are responsible for, right? So like our employees, our family members, and even our own stupid flesh, right? Like our own pride, our own arrogance, our own flesh, and the desires thereof. And so we have to realize we have enemies, and if we don't think we're at war, we're just going to get defeated time after time. But let's drill down a little bit. We have enemies, but we want to serve two masters, right? We don't we're confused, which leads to cowardice. Our confusion leads to cowardice. Think about it. If someone comes into your house and uh, and without asking, they come in the front door and they start walking toward you during the day, and they're smiling. Like, that's a little bit of confusion, right? Do I pull out my gun and tell them to get it down the ground, or well, what do I do? Because they're smiling like they think they should be here, right? um, if they start coming toward you quickly, running towards you, it kind of clarifies it a little bit more. They come in at night, and they're being sneaky, and then pretty soon you hear creaking down the hallway. That's it's a little less confusing, right? My point is that confusion, if you're not clear on things, confusion leads to cowardice. It makes me not know how to act. It makes me not do the brave thing because I'm waiting for more information. Um, it leads to inaction. Um, Now, if we were to live in a society where, hey, if somebody walks in your house, it's kind of a neighborly thing, right? Like neighbors just kind of walk in your front door, and they start calling your name. Maybe they don't go all the way into your bedroom, but they start calling your name. There are probably societies that have had that kind of culture, right? And so you'd have a better, you'd be less confused if you saw someone come in your house, right? Um, if you had a society where it's like, hey, if somebody even tries your doorknob, that's a threat, right? Like, we don't trust each other, and anybody who tries my doorknob, they're a threat, right? The gun's coming out, and I'm waiting for them to come through the door, and then I'm going to tell them to hit the ground, right? And I'm going to have my gun trained on him, because I'm not confused because I live in a place that's dangerous and anybody who comes in my door. But if you're in a gray area and you're not sure what you believe, you're not sure the structure, you're not sure what to expect, that leads to inaction. And when man is confused about who he serves, he's kind of becoming a coward. In a biblical sense, if you're confused, like Joshua said, choose this day who you will serve. You are laying down and you're making a decision. You're laying down a decision. You're drawing a battle line, and you're saying, don't cross this line. You are removing confusion. You are setting boundaries. You are defining stuff and drawing conclusions based on that. And that leads to, all right, now I know I need to act. It's clear that I can act in good conscience now, right? But if you're confused, you're double-minded. The other one is this idea of man's good and God's glory. And I'm the one I put this on here because I'm guilty of it. And so one of the things I draw this connection between, hey, this is about God's glory, and guess what? It's man's good, right? Because what I really mean to say is it glorifies God to bless those he loves and who are called according to his purpose, and cause all things to work out together for good for those people, for that man, for those people. And so in a way it's true, right? The mistake we make is when we put them on the same level. And this is going to be a thing as we talk, because we need to understand how things cascade down. When God says when God says don't commit adultery, that is because it damages our understanding of God's glory. It damages God's glory in our eyes. When God says don't steal, he is basically, all these things are tied to his glory. And if we do these things, it takes glory away from God. When we glorify him, when we do things that are hard, it adds to his glory, things that he asks us to do. I may have to work on the wording on this one, but it glorifies God to Ephesians 2:10, is it? All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so it glorifies God to bless that man who is called according to his purpose. Why does he bless that man? Because it glorifies him. Why does he tell us not to sin? Because it glorifies him. Why does he tell us to be faithful to our wives? Because it glorifies him. It shows everybody what that relationship looks like. And so it's not man's good and God's glory are on the same level. God's glory is first, and man's good is a execution of that. It's one of the ways we do that. But the why is God's glory. And so that helps us make decisions. So whenever we see any commandments and we say, are we doing this in our home? It's not just like, we're being legalistic, we're doing a commandment. No, it's we see how we can glorify God by obeying him. He is glorified when we obey him. And so now there's the why. It's not just legalism, it's a why. It's not just, well, God said it, that settles it. It's like, he told me to do it, so I'm going to do it, which is good because it's obedience. But even that glorifies God. Your obedience, even if you don't understand why he's telling you to do something, glorifies him. And so it's a very, very awesome relationship that we have. But I want to point out, though, that oftentimes that confusion is self-imposed because we're serving two masters. We want to serve two masters. I don't want to cut off sin. I don't want to cut off its head. I don't want to just execute sin. I want to reserve it. I want to, hey, what if I want to sin again later? Oh God, please help me not to sin, but I kind of want to sin later. And I want to hold on to that love for sin. No, our confusion oftentimes is self-imposed. We don't want to think about how to lead our family. We don't want conflict. We want everything to be easy. We want to come home after a long day's work and we just want to relax, right? And that our desire to relax, that puts us at odds with raising our family. It puts us at odds with the things we need to do, the hard conversations that we need to have that will orient our families to the glory of God. All right. So, but what if this is an old slide. I need to hide, or I need to delete that one. And then delete that one. I need to delete that one. These are from an old slideshow. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. So why it's hard to lead well to his glory. Well, I mean, why is it hard to lead well to his glory? Well, we've gone through these before as well. You need two masters. Oh, this is a better one though. I think this is a better slide. Sorry guys, I'll get through this quickly. Good. I like this one better. We're gonna do that. Yeah. Okay. So this is the call to action: is don't foster your own confusion. Don't contribute to it. Don't feed it. Don't feed your own cowardice. That's the call to action. So what we'll do in this class is we're gonna get clarity, and clarity comes from having only one master, one goal, God's glory. We'll talk about objections and some benefits right now. Let's get to it. All right, so objections to clarity. So some of the objections to that clarity is but don't I have to do all the commands of Jesus? Like, don't I have to, it's you're saying do all this stuff to the glory of God, but don't I have to do all the commands? Well, here's the thing. Don't worry, because you will do all the commands with a whole heart if you're focused first on God's glory. Next objection. How will that work if I ignore all of God's other commands and focus only on his glory? And same thing, focusing on his glory will lead you to the other commands and will help you understand them with much more clarity. And so the glory of God contextualizes everything and makes it make sense. All right, what's the word of the benefits? The benefits are that that we glorify God when we care about his glory, right? It glorifies God. It aims our entire being at honoring him on his terms, according to his commands. Then it focuses man. No longer do I have to control things. My focus shifts to knowing, understanding, and obeying his commands for his glory. It focuses our theology and our hermeneutic. We now bring everything we learn in the word under God's glory. And then it emboldens man, right? It organizes the information and removes the noise. When we focus on his glory, we become unconfused, the opposite of what we just talked about, and then it directs our steps. All right, so then I have to fix this slide too. So we get clarity. The mission for leaders is clear. We grow to understand what glorifies God in any situation and how to act accordingly. Let me say that another. Let me talk how that. So when we want to do everything to the glory of God and we decide that's the goal, if we decided that today, we would quickly say tomorrow, we would say, oh, I just ran into my first thing and I'm not sure how it glorifies God. This situation, and I'm not sure how it glorifies God. It's like now I have like two things competing with each other. Let's say, oh, everybody says, your family comes first, and you're not supposed to, don't mess up at work. You need to do everything they tell you to, even if it's immoral, because you have to take care of your family. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to do something immoral, something against God that takes glory away from God so I can take care of my family, which glorifies God, right? But now we're just like, no, we realize that God takes care of us. God is the one who prospers us, not man. As Abraham said, I'm not going to take the spoil, you kings of Sodom and the valley there. I'm not going to take your spoil because then you'll say that I got it from you. I'm going to get it from God. And so we're not people who we're not men who are order takers when it comes to morality issues. We have clarity. And so now when it's a decision like that, we're up against two we have a hard decision, either lose your job or dishonor God. We say, okay, well, we'll lose our job because it honors God when I trust him, when I look to him for my provision. Just like King Asa, he was he was a good king for a long time, but then toward the end of his life, no, yeah, Asa, yeah. Toward the end of his life, he was kind of what was it? Israel was building like cutting off Judah from trade routes, and Judah, Asa went to Syria and gave him a bunch of gold and said, "Hey, go attack Israel for me." And he did, and it kind of worked, right? But and then he got a foot disease at the end of his life, and he went to the doctors and trusted the doctors. And God sent a prophet and said, "You did these things, but you didn't come to me. You trusted in other armies, Ben Hadad, or whatever his name is in Syria. You trusted doctors, and you should have come to me." And and so and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be like Asa at the end of his life. I want to be like Asa at the beginning of his life. All right. We trust God, right? For every situation, it glorifies him when we trust him. All right. And then we'll have some tools too. So we'll use some real tools to be able to lead better. The logos, we're going to find your reasoning. So you're going to be able to make a case based on what glorifies God. You're leading your family in this direction of God's glory. Now you're going to go through life adjusting everything to glorify him more. And you're going to know why, because it's for God's glory as it's expressed in his word. You will work on your ethos, your credibility. I work in branding, which is really this. It's do you have a good name? And I know that there are marketers out there who who are just like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We just make you look good for money. But the way we do it at Resound, we are a company run by Christians who love Jesus and want to see him glorified. And we look at it more like this: a good name is better than riches. And so, are you someone who's followable? Do you have do people get that about you? And some of that is a little external, but it starts with internal. It starts internally. And so, are you the kind of person who should be followed? Do you think that about yourself? And I think this is a really good ground for discipleship, because when we get with other guys, we can say, "Hey, I'm working on my ethos," and then we can encourage them and just say, "Hey, this is where you're really strong. This is where what I really love about you, your leadership in this group, and it's that ethos, your ability to have credibility." And then here's some things that would hurt your credibility, or things that have hurt your credibility. Maybe you acted hypocritically a little bit, or gave the impression of acting hypocritically. And then there's the pathos, which is connecting with their emotions, being able to say, "Hey, I care about you, and this is why like in a family situation, this is why I want to do this." Also, in a work situation, "Hey, we want to be the kind of company, and you want to be the kind of employee that does the right thing for our clients or for our customers or whatever, right? Or for our employer. You want to do that. That's how I see you, and that's how I want to keep seeing you. So don't compromise, right?" So we can make those cases to people. These are some of the tools I think we can use that we don't talk about very much. Usually we talk about, "Oh, are you logical?" And then we turn around and say, like, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so then you have the logos, you have the um, you have the what and your reasoning and your well-reasoned argument that really connects with them. and then you have the ethos. But we don't talk about we talk about the emotional part, but we don't really break it down. And there are really two parts to that, according to Aristotle. And that was the ethos, your credibility, and then pathos, their emotions toward you. All right. So let's look at, this is going to be painful. We're going to look at two models, right? Father is a nice guy, or dad is kind of dumb. Father is a nice guy, or father knows best. So we'll look at these two models. So in the father is dumb. We have a situation where dad is kind of a chump, right? He doesn't know everything. He's so humble. Sometimes the family needs to rebuke him for his own good. They don't respect him that much. His wife may even be smarter and wiser than he is, since he's kind of a big kid. If the husband and wife argue, there's no leader in the conversation. In fact, he might lose his temper and then go and apologize and tell his wife she's right, whether he believes it or not, whether it's true or not, just like always. His kids see him as someone who can be manipulated because they see mom do it all the time. And the family is without a strong leader and without authority to say no. His daughters are vulnerable and without protection. His boys are without a model of a man with a backbone. His wife doesn't respect him and knows he's weak. And the family can guilt him into doing whatever they want. And you can imagine it can get worse than that too. If you are not providing a clear direction and a clear foundation, and anybody can come into your house and do different things, right? Not just entertainment, but people, and you can be guilted into doing things that are wrong. And because you're weak, you don't have the backbone that protects your family. But then there's another model, and this is the father knows best model. He's been asked and equipped to lead by God, and he knows it. And although he's not perfect, he calls whatever shots are necessary, and nobody is allowed to rebel against his decisions within the home as long as those decisions don't counter scripture. He determines the direction and leads in the way he sees fit, and he gets that from the Bible. The family is secure because there is a godly man in charge who knows how to set down hard edges. Guys, we have to think about who we want to be. Do you want to be the nice guy, or do you want to be the chump, or do you want to be the guy who has direction, has a backbone, and who people look to with respect and who they'll follow? Okay, let's talk about the how do we lead when your family or job has or your family or job has smart and a little rebellious employees or people involved. Just like we're all a little smart and a little rebellious, right? When you're too busy to micromanage, right? When today's issues are a little bit confusing, we're not totally sure. Culture hasn't run into this before. Do we use the pronouns because it's the nice thing to do? Do we go to the gay wedding and bring the gift? And then you don't want to be a dictator. So how to lead when you don't want to be a dictator? It's hard, right? It's hard to answer some of these things. But the answer is here. We start from the top. Oops. You start from the top. You stop relying on your own authority, and you start orienting everyone toward the glory of God. This is going to become a theme. All right, so leadership, not for your personal gain. It is not for your glory, and it is not optional. It is for the glory of God. All right, and the result that we're going to have when this is all done is we're going to have leadership defined by the glory of God. We're going to have clarity, and this is going to be a good thing for our families. A better knowledge of our job as leaders in the home, church, and in the world. And it's all, we bring clarity and direction. Biblical truth is applied to everyday life. We're going to build morale by encouraging. We're going to encourage people, and we're going to build character through encouragement, guidance, and love. And we're going to do all this to the glory of God by orienting every structure and decision over time to his glory. All right, and that's about it. I have a summary that I think I need to rewrite this slide. Um, this was a different thing, but it's kind of relevant. All right, so and any questions? All right, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I think I have some editing to do, but I hope that's been encouraging so far.